Today on the show, I'm going to be talking about Raven, Daughter of Darkness. In this story, we see Raven go up against her family, but her family aren't who you think they are. So just to give you some context for this story takes place between DC Rebirth and DCU, so it's like in this blank period that we don't know much about for Raven. It's Raven's second solo book, the first one just being called Raven, and this is a direct continuation of Raven, but you don't actually need to have read Raven to understand Raven, Daughter of Darkness, which is really good, and they're both limited series, so they're both very short. This book is being written by Marv Wolfman, who is one of the two original creators of Raven, the other being George Pérez. Very quick side note before we go any further in today's video. I've been actively running a makeup channel for 2 months now. Please go and check that out if that interests you, because I love makeup. Makeup's my main passion outside of comics, so please check it out. So our story starts 4 months ago in the Tomorrow Tech Labs. There's a sudden blackout, and when the power comes back on, everything seems okay. But then we see that during the blackout, something managed to escape. Then we skip ahead to 46 hours ago. We see Winter's Gate Manor. Now, Winter's Gate Manor is famous for being the home of Baron Winters and the team Night Force, who deal with supernatural beings, but Night Force haven't appeared in years, so it's really interesting to see Baron Winters suddenly alive. Baron Winters is talking about Raven and how she is both good and evil incarnate, but because of that she needs to be in constant balance, and it's his job to maintain the balance of good and evil. But Baron Winters points out that if Raven were truly at harmony with herself, the demon inside of her would not be trying to escape. If she was true balance, there wouldn't be a demon inside of her. And he says he may be forced to take action as it's his job to maintain balance. Then we skip ahead to December 14th and we see Raven having fun with some of her school friends, and they're like on a beach, and this was apparently all Raven's idea. It's like a camping trip that she came up with. To cut a long story short, her friends want to know more about her, so she talks about how her mum was a member of a cult and she was the only kid around and she had to keep her emotions in check, but she makes sure not to mention the fact that it was all in a parallel world called Azarath and there was magic. Like, she keeps that to herself. Raven then feels a scream in the distance, so she sends her soul self out to investigate, and at the same time, Baron Winters says that it's Raven's destiny to die on Christmas Eve. Turns out the person that screamed is just like some random person in a hoodie, and they are being chased by some form of militia. We don't know who this militia belongs to, and Raven flies in and tells them that they will not hurt this person anymore. Raven takes a moment to sort of sense what's going on here, and she senses a great evil coming from this person, and she's like, oh my god, did I do the wrong thing here? She gives chase, but that's when she sees Trigon, and she can't believe it. Trigon should not be in this realm. So when she goes to fight Trigon, Trigon's like disappeared suddenly, and it was just an illusion, and Raven's super confused, so she decides to return to her body for now. But when she's back at her body, she can't sleep. She just saw Trigon. Trigon is her greatest fear, and she's just overwhelmed by the idea that something terrible is about to happen and that someone is trying to control her. However, when she gets home the next day, she does note to herself that she had fun. Overall, it was a fun experience, and she's not used to that, like having fun and allowing herself to feel happy. She's living with her mum's sister and her husband, so her aunt and uncle. And when she gets in, she tells them that she had a great time, but she's feeling a little bit sick, so she just goes straight to bed. It also turns out that the aunt and uncle are really interested in getting Raven involved with Christianity, because don't forget, Raven was raised on Azarath. Christianity doesn't exist on Azarath. It's all like mysticism. So this is Raven's first ever Christmas on Earth, and everything about Christmas is totally alien to her. The next day, Raven decides that before school, she's going to take herself to the location of the fight from yesterday. And when she finally gets there, she realizes it wasn't a militia attacking this person at all. All of what appeared to be military trucks and vans have the Tomorrow Labs logo on them. She takes herself to the labs, and there's only one person alive, and they are barely breathing. She reaches into this person's mind and finds out the person from the other day is a girl called Azure, and they have the power of illusions. And as soon as Raven finds that out, an illusion of Trigon appears. So Raven ends up having to use her powers to sense Azure and separate illusion from reality, which isn't easy because the illusions are manifesting as Trigon, her greatest fear, demons, and cultists. When she eventually does find Azure and goes to look at her face, Azure has no nose, no mouth, just a giant pair of blue eyes. Raven tries to get Azure to understand that they're not enemies, and Raven just wants to understand her, but Azure casts another illusion anyway. By the time Raven breaks out of this illusion, she's completely drained. Raven decides that enough is enough and goes home, but as Raven leaves, Azure reappears. While at home, Raven's meditating on this situation, trying to piece together what information she has, and she's really not getting anywhere. But that's when her friends turn up. It's about her friend Terry. Terry's grandmother, who's suffering from cancer, has just been put into hospital in intensive care. Terry wants her friends there to support her, so Raven naturally agrees to go. The worst thing about this is Terry has no other living relatives. Her parents died just a few months back and she has no aunts or uncles. This means if Terry's grandmother dies, Terry will be put in foster care because she's only 16 years old. So Raven naturally teleports in to see if she can heal Terry's grandmother, but Raven's powers can only ease pain. They can't hold back death. And sure enough, Terry's grandmother passes away shortly after that. Terry is instantly offered a room at her friend's place, and Raven does consider sort of using her powers to ease Terry's emotional pain, but she's like, no, people need to grieve. They need their time to grieve. But she does plant a small thought in Terry's mind. So later that day, when Raven and her family are decorating their Christmas tree, which by the way, Raven finds this whole thing very confusing. She doesn't understand how a tree covered in popcorn and cranberries and glass could be anything like a religious symbol. But her friends and Terry all turn up, and it turns out Terry sort of wants to use this time with her friends to help ease her emotional pain naturally. And that's when they have like this impromptu Christmas party. It's also here where Raven's aunt pulls Raven aside and asks her if she'd be interested in going to midnight mass, and Raven agrees to do this, but she doesn't actually know what midnight mass is. What Raven doesn't know is while this party is going on, Azure is actually in Raven's room, snooping through all of her stuff. Raven senses someone upstairs and goes to check, but Azure can make herself invisible because illusions. By the time Raven is back downstairs, Raven's aunt actually thinks she sees Raven's mother, Angela, outside the window. But it turns out it was Azure, and naturally Raven can sense Azure, so she gives chase, and she's even able to read Azure's thoughts at this point. And there's two voices in there, and they want Raven dead. Turns out Raven is some kind of gateway, but she doesn't know what she's a gateway to. That's when Raven's attacked with a non-lethal force beam. Turns out people want to capture her as well as kill Azure. We don't actually know who wants to capture Raven. Raven even says, who they are does not matter, they will not capture me, and it's like, who they are does kind of matter for me, the reader. Rather than being lethal with her powers, she actually just teleports the helicopter pilot and the sniper to Bel Rev. Once Raven's done protecting herself, she goes to protect Azure, and she manages to save her, but Azure is in a lot of pain, so when Raven uses her powers to sort of ease Azure's pain, Azure totally rejects this, like does this electric shock thing on Raven, and then Azure randomly starts to die. Raven believes this to be whoever is hunting her and Azure, so like she screams out, you didn't have to kill her. She's still being hunted by whoever this is. It's literally never made clear who she's being hunted by. So Raven teleports herself to Tomorrow Tech Labs. She sees like a vision of Baron Winters, but the Baron is like, she shouldn't be able to see us. We can see her, but she shouldn't be able to see us. Then Raven begins to search through the labs because she can sense like residual emotions. And then she's attacked by a tentacle thing, and this tentacle thing turns out to be owned by Azure. It's very weird. This tentacle thing is absorbing Raven's soul, and suddenly the lab is packed with scientists and security. Azure actually uses her powers to kill the guards, so Raven redirects their souls to the tentacle thing to feed it. This causes Azure to feel all the pain she put onto those people as they died, which causes her to drop Raven, and this allows Raven to get her own energy back. Raven decides to escape, and when she teleports, she ends up in Winter's Gate Manor. To cut a long story short, the Baron isn't happy that Raven has the ability to go to the manor because he's the only one that should have that power. She tries to question him, he runs, runs, she gives chase. She ends up in San Francisco in 1906, an earthquake happens, Raven helps to heal people and goes back through a time gate to the manor, basically uses her powers to interrogate the Baron, finds out there are a lot of Azures, not just one. They're all basically failed attempts at recreating Raven by Trigon. They're her sisters. But the Baron doesn't know anything outside of the fact that they exist, and to maintain balance, Raven must die. When Raven asks the Baron why Azure is trying to kill her, he just says, "How is that my problem?" and throws her into the fireplace, sending her through time to Terry's grandmother's funeral. Naturally, while here, everyone is comforting Terry, but then someone comes up to Raven, asks for Raven, not Rachel, Raven's real name, and when Raven turns around, it's her mother. And that's where we're going to be ending part 1. I have very mixed feelings on Raven, Daughter of Darkness. I really like what it's trying to do. I think there is a great story there somewhere. I think with just a little bit of tweaking, this could potentially be one of the best teen hero books of all time. So here's how I would tweak it. First of all, you're missing like a level of surrealism. You need to have surrealism with a dedicated Raven story. The way that they're sort of executing it is like a standard superhero story, and I think for Raven on her own, that's just not working. I think if they did something similar to Neil Gaiman's Sandman, this would work much better. At the same time, I think Tomorrow Tech Labs should be replaced with a cult, or like a group of occultists sort of playing with things they don't really understand, rather than just like a random lab that for some reason had Azure. Like, that is not explained at all. I also feel like even if you were to keep the story as it is with Tomorrow Tech Labs, the art and the story don't go together. Like, the art works for the Raven being a normal teen experiencing Christmas segments, but then for the superhero segments, it just doesn't work because the superhero segments are pretty surreal. You know, you've got Raven experiencing these illusions, and I feel like they should be more psychedelic. They should be more surreal. And so I feel like this could be improved by us having like a combination of 2 art styles. Don't get me wrong, the art as it is isn't particularly bad. In fact, I quite like the art. I just kind of feel like this art with this story makes both of them seem weaker than they really are. But because I want to end on a positive note, I want to talk about what I like so far. I really like seeing Raven develop non-superhero friendships. I like seeing how well she knows herself in comparison to other people around her age. You know, she's a lot more mature than other teenagers because she had to be a lot more mature than other teenagers, and she's a lot more self-aware than they are. I feel like there's just a level of understanding of the character that's present in those scenes that wasn't executed properly in terms of artistic decisions and story structure. I understand why they had to go with a standard superhero art style, because even though this is a solo Raven book for the first 6 issues, we covered the first 3 issues in this video, from issue number 7 onwards, we see Raven begin to form her own Night Force team. I actually did a video talking about Raven's Night Force a few months back, so that will be on the screen somewhere now. But I feel like even having one art style for the first 6 issues and then having another art style for the second 6 issues would have been better, just because it would have signified, okay, this is going from Raven solo story that's kind of a bit trippy to a mystic hero book. Overall, I don't hate what I've read. Do I like it? It could be better, but I wouldn't be talking about it unless I kind of liked it. So there you go. I guess I like this. It's super effective! Okay guys, that is it for today. So what did you think of Raven, Daughter of Darkness? Are you like me where you're like, well, I guess I like it, but it could be improved? Please let me know in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to thumbs up, subscribe to all of my social links. Check out my Patreon if you want to support the show. I'm actually sort of revamping my Patreon at the moment. So for just $1, you get everything. If you're not into Patreon, I have a PayPal donation link. And also check out my makeup channel, please. I've been working really hard on that channel. But for now, my name is Faz. This has been Exploring Comics, and it is super effective.